Okay. So welcome everybody to this third Rulemaking Advisory Committee for the Focused Investment Partnership Program at OWEB. My name is Eric Hartstein, the Policy Coordinator at OWEB, and we'll just start with a round of introductions, and I'll kind of call on people as I see you on the screen. So starting with Jesse.
Morning, everybody. Jesse Steele. I'm the Executive Director at the Grand Mountain Model Watershed.
Morning, Jesse. Go, Eric.
Morning, everybody. Eric Williams, Restoration Grant Manager at OWEB.
Okay. Leah.
Hey folks, this is Leah Tai. I'm a hydrologist with the Fish and Wildlife Service.
Morning, Leah. Let's go to Jillian.
Good morning, everyone. Jillian McCarthy, Partnerships Coordinator at OWEB.
Brandy. Oh, Brandy might be frozen. We'll try back here in a minute. Let's go with Brad.
Morning, folks. Brad Nye with the Oregon Desert Land Trust.
Morning, Brad. Denise.
Morning, Denise Hoffert, one of OWEB's Partnerships Coordinators.
Looks like Brandy's unfrozen.
Yeah, sorry about that. My internet was kind of in and out. Brandy St. Clair with the Lakeview SWCD.
Welcome, Brandy. Let's go, Andy.
Good morning, everyone. This is Andy Spurka with ODFW. I'm the Private Forest Record Grants Coordinator.
Thanks, Andy. Go to Haley.
Good morning, I'm Haley Lutz, Executive Director for Coos Watershed Association.
Morning, Haley. And Colin.
Morning, everyone. Colin Jones with Tillamook Estuaries Partnership, standing in for Christy this morning.
Appreciate it, Colin. Let's go to Chris.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Chris Lorian. I work for the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and I'm the Native Fish Conservation Coordinator.
Morning, Chris. Melissa.
Morning, everyone. Melissa Petschauer, Ecological Programs Coordinator with High Desert Partnership.
Thanks, Melissa. Let's go to Audrey.
Yeah, good morning. Audrey Hatch. I am the Conservation Outcomes Coordinator with OWEB.
Thanks, Audrey. And Herb.
Morning, everyone. Herb Winters, Gillum SWCD.
Great, welcome, Herb. So I think that is all the RAC members and OWEB staff. I don't think I forgot anybody. Okay. So today we were going to go through the revisions made to the rules that we discussed, really in the first two RAC meetings, and that's through the board funding decision section of the FIP rules. Then we'll have a bit of a break, and then we have the initial discussion on the proposed rule revisions really through the end of the rule set. We did not have any written public comments submitted, but we do have some time set aside for verbal public comments if anybody wants to provide comment at that time. And then we will be wrapped up and get folks out of here by noon at the absolute latest. So any questions on the agenda? Great. Okay, so Jillian will be sharing screen with us. Thank you, Jillian. Am I making it maybe just a little bit bigger, Jillian?
How's that?
I can see that it work for others. Some nodding heads.
Give a thumbs up. Okay.
Okay. Okay, so we'll start with some of the revisions that we made in the definitions section. So I didn't have a note in here, but just to make it clear, in the high performing partnership definition, at the previous meeting we had partnership in parentheses there, and we removed it because we were sort of using high performing partnership and a partnership that was maybe applying to be a FIP interchangeably. And there could be scenarios where somebody would be applying as a partnership to the FIP program and not be a high performing partnership. So we wanted just to make that clear here. So we removed the partnership from parentheses, and you'll see it lowercase p throughout the rules as partnerships that are applying to be a FIP. And then the core partners definition. So this is new. This was discussed at the last meeting. And we think the new definition provides a little bit more heft and a better description as to what core partners are and how they participate in a FIP initiative. So any questions on either the core partners or and removing the parenthetical partnership? Okay, not seeing any. Go down to the next section where we made some changes, which is in eligibility. So we removed the 25% match, or the 25% from the match here in eligibility. And we'll get into this here in a minute, but what we're proposing to do is to track match at the project level rather than at the FIP initiative level or the programmatic level, in order to better align with the grant programs at OWEB. Our systems are really kind of set up to track match at the project level, and they really aren't at the initiative or the programmatic level. And we'll talk about this here in a little bit, but since we would remove the 25% match here, what that would mean is that if current match requirements hold, so we would have 25% match requirement for restoration grants and 5% for technical assistance and engagement grants, 25% also for monitoring. But what that would mean and why this would be 25%, why the 25% is removed here, is that if we have sort of different match requirements for project level grants, 25% for restoration, 5% for technical assistance, that would not mean a 25% match across the board. So we would just have that the match is being sought here. And we'll get into a little more detail when we get to the match section here, but wanted just to pause and see if there's any questions, knowing that we'll talk about it in a little bit more depth in a little bit here. Okay. Okay, so moving into the evaluation criteria. So at the last RAC meeting, there was some discussion on what was the former A, the extent to which the initiative addresses a board identified priority. There was some support for keeping that in some form in the FIP rules, specifically in the evaluation criteria. So we actually moved that into the new D here. So the new D reads that application shall be evaluated on the extent to which the partnership's theory of change supports the proposed initiative and aligns with a board identified ecological priority. So any questions on that change?
Eric, this is Jesse. Quick question on the ecological priority. Is that defined somewhere else in the rule set? I know the board made kind of high, medium, and low priority decisions, but is an ecological priority defined?
So we have a section on ecological priorities. So basically just saying that the board will adopt ecological priorities of the state. So that's in section 0030. Yeah, thanks, Jillian.
Okay.
Does that help, Jesse?
It does. I'm just wondering if there is there a line at which it becomes an ecological priority? Are those just the high priorities identified by the board? Are they medium and high? Is that laid out somewhere? Or...
Yeah, so currently the board has adopted ecological priorities and has not made a distinction between those as high, medium, or low. Ecological priorities are they are weighted the same.
Okay, and I'm probably getting confused here. Those are the 6 or 7 categories that the board identified, not the geographic areas that they've put a high, medium, and low designation on.
You're thinking about like within the native, say within the native fish. Yeah, so currently we have in the native fish ecological priority, there's the high, medium, low watersheds or rivers, and you would be eligible to apply if you're working in a high or a medium priority, but not in a low priority.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks for catching me
and
up there.
It looked like, yeah, it looked like Denise was like you were waving your hand. So did you have anything to add?
No, I knew what he was talking about, so I was going to help clarify, but Jesse got it. So
okay. Okay. So any other questions, comments, concerns about moving the ecological priority language into D here? Okay. Not seeing any. Wanted to, there's a little bit of a late breaking proposed edit here, and that's in B. So that it currently reads the extent to which the partnership demonstrates an established governance structure in a shared history of collaboratively implementing conservation actions. And OWEB staff had a bit of a discussion last week, and going to recommend adding this new language here about adaptively managing conservation actions. So that's the edit in purple. again, sort of getting at how the partnership has been collaboratively implementing projects, has an established governance structure, but also how are they getting at adaptively managing the work that they are engaged in. So I'll stop there, see if there's any questions, comments, concerns.
Eric, Brad and I. Oh,
yeah. Go ahead, Brad.
Sorry, it's not clear to me that collaboratively implementing wouldn't include adaptively managing, and I'm just wondering if there's something more specific you're trying to get at with that. Adaptively managing, is that, you know, being able to monitor outcomes, or is it, you know, if you're collaboratively implementing something, to me, that's the entire program, start to finish. And the more you start adding, you know, I'm not sure that phrase is necessary, or maybe if it's more specific, I can understand what it's getting to, but no big deal. Obviously, it's just trying to keep it shorter rather than longer, and not add layer phrases that mean essentially the same thing or redundant on each other.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Brad. Maybe I'll turn to Audrey. So your camera is on if you want to.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. And speak to that for a little bit. I think the discussion came from really kind of some programmatic conversations about the FIP, and it is related to outcomes tracking over time, and thinking that there is something meant by adaptively managing, in addition to the history of collaboration, that really does get at that use of the data, as well as looking at the actions over time, and really just wanting to capture the thought that went into evaluating the FIP program regarding adaptive management somewhere in the suite of criteria, and be able to give reviewers an opportunity to speak to that is where that came from. Thanks.
Thanks, Audrey. Eric, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Yeah, just to add on to what Audrey said, this particular criterion is about evaluating the history of the partnership and the effectiveness of the partnership. And you can be collaboratively implementing project by project, but the phrase there for adaptively managing is, in addition to that, are you changing your trajectory to meet the goals of your long-term strategic action plan, as well as simply implementing project by project. So I think that's the rationale for adding the phrase, Brad, that hopefully isn't completely duplicative, but I do understand where you're coming from. But it's really to make sure that folks understand what our technical reviewers are looking at when they're evaluating partnership history. It's of course the program is competitive, and all these criteria I think are challenging to meet and and rise to the top. But that one is particularly important for evaluating the partnership history.
Sounds good. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, as long as that's becomes clear in terms of the actual factors that confirm that criterion, that'd be great. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, good question. Thanks, Brad. Okay, if there's nothing else on that edit, we did change the performance history and composition of the partnership criterion. We broke it into 2 new criteria based on the discussion with the RAC at the last meeting. So This is the new B, which we just noted, and then C, the composition of the partnership is appropriate to achieve ecological outcomes within the initiative. So felt that this would add some more detail on how partnerships are being evaluated as a high performing partnership. Chris.
Yeah, just going back to that last to B, I'm just wondering if maybe one possibility for the wording there is that the partnerships are collaboratively implementing conservation actions and adaptively managing to achieve ecological outcomes is kind of the purpose here, is that we're putting in actions, but then we're also adapting as we see the results of our actions to ultimately achieve those outcomes. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, I saw a few nodding heads, but what do folks think about that wording? Okay, so Haley says seems more clear to me. Thumbs up. Okay, I think we can roll with that one. Thanks, Chris. And is there anything on the new criterion C? Okay, so I think we're good with that one as well. And that concludes the evaluation criteria. And then moving down to the expert review process. So again, based on the discussion at the last RAC meeting, we hopefully provided some clarification here so that the expert review team will be providing a funding recommendation. So in addition to evaluating and ranking applications, so that's a bit of a change, but it seemed like the RAC was in pretty good agreement last time around that that funding recommendation would be really helpful for applicants. And then we also adjusted where OEB staff would be providing materials to the applicants and the board. Removed it from this section and placed it in the next section just for kind of clarity as to when those materials are being provided. So any questions in the expert review process and the changes proposed here? Okay. Not seeing any. We'll go down to that next section, which is the funding recommendation process. So again, this is kind of just adding that clarity. So the edits describe here that OEB staff will be reviewing the results from the expert review team meeting. And based on the board spending plan items for FIPS, make a funding recommendation to a board committee. And it is at this point where materials will be sent out to applicants. and that's in section A. We'll stop here, see if there's questions, comments, concerns. Okay. Not seeing any. Subsection C, edits here looking to provide clarity on the role of the board committee. So reads that the board committee shall make a funding recommendation to the board based on the results of the expert review team, the OEB staff funding recommendations, the interview of the core partners, and the evaluation criteria. So hopefully that provides some really good clarity as to what the board committee is doing in this FIP process. Okay, Brad, I see your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, my internet connection's a little funky, but just language-wise, the results of the expert review team doesn't make sense to me. So maybe say the expert review team's report or whatever it is, and then if they have such a thing, and I'm not tracking that, but it looks like above you may have expert review team capitalized. Maybe needs to be there as well.
Yeah, I think definitely on the expert review team being capitalized. Yeah, the results language, I think we've gone a little bit back and forth on what that all encapsulates. And landed on, well, the results is basically everything that came out of the review team meeting, including the funding recommendations. But if there's a different
maybe it's just expert review. Yeah, sorry, maybe it's expert review teams. Well, I can't say expert review teams review, but it just from the English language perspective, saying the results of the team doesn't really make sense, and the rest of them make sense. The funding recommendations, the core partner interview, and the evaluation criteria. Anyway, no big deal, but.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. I mean, we can kind of noodle over a different term if that's not the best. And yeah, it is something that we've kind of discussed a little bit, is what is the best word to use there.
We could use there based on the expert review team evaluation, because we do publish an evaluation that captures the strengths and concerns, comments, and their recommendations.
What do folks think about substituting evaluation for results? Got a couple thumbs up. Okay. Great. So we'll want to make the edit in C, and then I think we said results up in A as well. Yeah. Great, thanks, Julian. Okay, anything else in the funding recommendation process section? And we didn't have any new edits in the board funding decision, which is the section that we went through the last meeting. So we're into a fresh territory here, starting in the partnership agreement section. We were scheduled to have a break, but we're moving at a pretty brisk pace. So I'm going to suggest we just keep going, if that's all right with folks. Okay. Thumbs up, nodding heads. Okay, so in the partnership agreement section, we have removed the implementation language in in subsection 1, and then in 4 we have a pretty substantive edit here that we're proposing. So this is what's commonly referred to as the overlap rule in subsection 4. So it's the projects that are within a FIP geography and focused on the programs and actions that are identified in a FIP initiatives proposal are ineligible for OWEB's open solicitation grant program. So this has been in place since really the dawn of FIP, and we are proposing to eliminate this rule as we don't see it as being really necessary, and that FIP partnerships are busy implementing the work within their FIP geography, and it's also causing some issues, I think, with outside entities that are looking to implement projects within a FIP geography, and they're running into this rule and not able to apply, which is creating some frustration. And we're just not seeing it as being really a value add at this point. So seeing some thumbs up and kind of across the boards. But I also wanted to see if OWEB staff wanted to add anything else to the reasons why we want to eliminate this rule.
Eric.
Okay, go Jillian first, then Denise.
All right, thanks. I was just going to mention another example of when maybe it's become a challenge for the FIP program, just in the timing of open solicitation awards and FIP initiative awards, where there might be a pending application in open solicitation that was intended not to be funded through the FIP, but because the FIP award was made prior, some pretty major projects have had to be moved out of open solicitation and then into the FIP, which then creates like a domino of revising work plans and reallocating funds to projects that weren't necessarily intended to go through the FIP. So there's just been a little bit of a tangle there that we'd like to undo.
Thanks, Jillian. And Denise.
Yeah, so I had two things I was going to add to what Jillian just said. One is at the tail end of FIP. So Jillian spoke to kind of the onboarding of the FIP challenge of having the overlap, but as the FIP is coming to the end of their 6 years, they're not released into open solicitation until all of the funds in their FIP are allocated into grant agreement. So if there's a FIP for example, I'm making this up, that has $150,000 left. They have one final TRT to allocate that, but there are partners who have projects ready to go into open solicitation. They would have to wait until that final TRT happens and that final chunk of funding is allocated into GA before they are able to go back into open solicitation. So it's a little bit of a challenge for timing for folks as they come off of their FIP. And then the other thing I was going to raise has happened in the Clackamas, where there were private landowners who were not aware of the FIP. They wanted to do projects on their property to install large wood in their streams. And the FIP is not able to accommodate those projects because all of their funding is allocated. But those landowners are not able to work with partners to come into OS because of the overlap rule. So they just have to wait till the end of the FIP to do a project on their property. And it wasn't the intention of OWEB to limit folks like that from being able to implement projects. So those were just the two things I wanted to raise about how the overlap rule is impacting both the FIPs and folks that were never intended to be affected by the FIP. Thanks.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks, Denise and Jillian, for articulating those extra examples as to why the overlap rule is problematic in some cases. And I see a couple of hands. They want to note that Brandy concurs with eliminating the rules in the best interest of the partnerships, as well as the rest of the partners working within the landscape of a FIP geography. So we'll go to Haley first and then Brad.
Yeah, I guess maybe just a clarifying question. Maybe I heard you wrong, Denise, but did you say that FIPs would not be eligible to go into open solicitation until all of their FIP funding had been exhausted?
Yep, that's how it currently works. For the same, within the same geography, for the same actions that are identified in their FIP. So
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, I understand the current rule. I guess I feel like I potentially heard you say that even with the elimination of this, the OA would still be looking for FIPs to exhaust their funds, which sounds incorrect.
Right. No. So if we eliminate this, then FIPs would be able to come into OS. I'm saying right now, the way the rule is, they cannot come in until all of their FIP funding has been allocated into grant agreement.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for the clarification. I guess I could definitely see both sides of the coin on this. I think, as we have a FIP and we're the primary implementing partner in our FIP, and the amount of need in our community is quite great. And there are certainly projects continually coming up that were not anticipated at the time of our FIP application, because that was 6 years, it's a 6-year time frame, which is a long time. So I could definitely see our FIP potentially going to open solicitation and participating in our FIP. I can also see the other side of the coin, where people in open solicitation feel like the FIPs are given plenty, and that the open solicitation should be there to support other partners at a higher, monetary level, since OWEB is making such a large, consistent investment in the partnership. So I think there's definitely two sides of that to consider. I would say that, another little piece of it too is, you're putting in an application for a 6-year time period. In our case, we had all the projects defined for that 6 years. And the $12 million is probably going to go half as far as we anticipated it going because of inflation, but yet we're stuck with a $12 million investment on a website. And so that's certainly challenging. So I could almost see removing a project or two from our FIP, pushing those through open solicitation, so that our 12 million can go hopefully as much as we originally anticipated. So I just wanted to like throw out those few examples because I think that there's probably going to be very mixed feelings around the state about OWEB opening up those types of opportunities. Although I can certainly see, you know, from us as the FIP holder, I can certainly see some benefit to it, but I think others are probably also going to see some downsides to that as well.
Haley, can I ask you a quick question about that?
Yeah.
Do you think that you would have the capacity to implement in both? So you said that there's always projects coming in that weren't a part of your original FIP. I'm guessing that those projects must be fairly high priority, though, for Kuzwa overall to even consider working on them. Would your capacity enable you to work in both?
In our case, I think yes. Our organization, however, has larger capacity than some. Also, I say that because of how gosh dang long it's taking to permit things and for our partners to process grant agreements. And so with some of those timelines, to keep pace on projects with the ecological degradation and to keep pace with all of our PMs, we're starting projects years sooner than we used to. So I actually certainly could see that we would potentially have capacity to be operating in both programs, partially because our strategic plan, and we've had a, you know, our organization's had a long history of data collection. Like we have a really pretty defined target and priorities. And so I think we could operate in both. And I anticipate that would not make many folks in our region feel great. And I think it does beg the question of like, if OWEB is investing in FIPS, but yet a grant, you know, a partnership could get money in multiple different pots, then really what is the different strategy with the FIP investment? And I know there is different strategy on OWEB side, but I think, you know, just trying to be devil's advocate as well, I think there's a lot of different ways to view that. And it would be really interesting to get some good feedback from folks within and outside of the FIP program on this really big change.
Yeah, thanks, Haley. That's I think good food for thought. I have an example as well, but Brad's been really patient. See your hand up.
Sorry, folks.
Go ahead, Brad.
I had someone arrive here, but it was really along those same lines. I'm in 100% agreement with the reasons OLED's giving for getting rid of this, but just wondering how you do deal with, you know, the question of actual FIP partners putting into both programs. So I think Haley's covered the concern there, and I was just wondering actually practically how OWEB would handle that situation. But I'm all in favor of not making it exclusive to FIP folks in the geography and the timing issues that Jillian and Denise mentioned as well.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. And I know we'll be really curious as to what sort of comments come in on this proposed revision. So I could definitely see it from kind of the scenario that Haley described, that, you know, people might see this as an opportunity to double dip into both FIP and open solicitation. But it's also, from an outside perspective, this rule has, I think perhaps unintentionally, eliminated opportunities for people that are not within a FIP partnership to do restoration or conservation work within a FIP geography. And I think Brandy may have been alluding to that in her comment in the chat, but I know that's been the case on at least some of the sage grouse FIPs, where there's been groups outside the partnership that have not been able to apply for open solicitation within a pretty big geography. So there's that consideration as well. And Haley, I see is your hand up new, or is that a stale one?
Yeah, yeah, as I said, it's a big shift, and I certainly am like thinking on both sides, and would be good to think about it more between this meeting and our next one for sure. But just off of hearing you chat, Eric, too, one question that came up for me though is like in that example, because I certainly don't think you want to. I understand the intention of not excluding good work from happening. That's obviously key. In the example that you're talking about, Eric, though, is there a partner who's within that FIP geography who's not a part of the FIP? Was that what you were referring to, or are they an active partner in the FIP?
These would be groups that are outside, that are not core partners.
Because that could be one thing to consider. Like if that is more of the type of problem of looking to ameliorate, I wonder if there could be language around that. You know, thinking about both sides of the coin, like maybe it would disincentivize partnerships in some weird way. I know there's a lot of value. Certainly that was a great exercise for us, was like, how do we all work together in this geography collaboratively? And our FIP certainly helped us formalize and increase collaboration in our basin, I would say. But, you know, you could consider allowing, even if they're in a FIP geography, if they're a non-FIP partner, they could go through open solicitation.
Right. Yeah, thanks, Haley. Brad, I see your hand up again. Brad, is that a stale hand, or do you have a new thoughts here? Okay, maybe we'll go get back to Brad. Other thoughts on proposed elimination of the overlap rule? Yeah, Eric.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I understand Haley's last point. Haley, are you suggesting keeping a form of the overlap rule here that says that the overlap rule basically still applies to core partners, but does not apply at any time to non-core partners?
Yeah, I think that was one thought. Like if the, you know, if everyone feels like there's enough downsides to having FIP partner, like core people be able to double dip, but also wanting to avoid the scenario that Eric was talking about where other partners couldn't do good work on the ground that we're ready to, it does seem like you could potentially do what you're talking about. I don't know if that's the best route, but just thinking through it, I think that could be an option.
Yeah, the concern I would have about that is, would that serve as a disincentive for an organization to join and become a core partner?
I know.
Like
yeah,
succeed.
which is one of the things I said is like, I feel like it could potentially, because
Gotcha.
You know, that was part of the cool work just from our example that we went through, is it really helped us kind of renew and define relationships with core partners in our area. And I think it could disincentivize that. But, you know, I don't know, it might be, I do think there are geographies where certain organizations and players are just more robust, and sometimes the FIP, I think, can like it's not the objective certainly, but can create a little bit of like power issues and struggles. Like if there is an organization and a group that can put together a really robust FIP application, but other partners might have opportunities pop up for them where maybe they weren't as robust at the beginning of the FIP. So being a core partner in the FIP made a lot of sense, but since they've really increased capacity, but there's not the wiggle room in the FIP because the money was allocated. I think there's just a lot of dynamics, and I certainly understand OAB's intention to create more flexibility, but yeah, how do you do it without disincentivizing some of what I think are the really powerful things of a FIP, and also making that a really distinct program within OAB? I think that the way OAB's really articulated that investment is really specific, and it might get watered down if there is this double dipping. It might disincentivize people from doing FIPs in general. I don't know.
Yeah, thanks. That's helpful.
Yeah, go ahead, Jillian.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to add one more thing, I guess, to the conversation to consider. And that's just around work plan development and decision-making of the core partners in the FIP. And so, as FIPs put together their work plans based on their strategic action plan, it can be this really nice, like succinct body of work that they want to implement. With the overlap rule, then we see potentially new projects coming in and shifting of work plan, and maybe not necessarily a dilution, it could be an addition. But things maybe change from what the partnership or what the initiative intended to do. The other thing that we've discussed as OWEB staff is that the partnership then sort of becomes the decision maker for projects that can come through or are eligible or not. And that's kind of an odd place to put the partnership, where those projects can't come to OWEB to be evaluated based on OWEB's funding criteria. They instead go to the partnership, and the partnership is the one to make that sort of funding decision on whether or not they want to make the space in the work plan for it. So just something else to consider in terms of decision making and the role of the partnership in those funding decisions.
Yeah, thanks, Jillian. And I think that probably becomes even more evident when you get into times of, say, high inflation, where there's potentially those projects, like I think it was Haley who was talking about, they're on the work plan, but if there's profound inflation, it's going to be really hard to implement within the 6 years, given a budget that is static. So see, any other questions or thoughts on this? Good discussion. Okay, so we can always come back to this if there are additional thoughts. But for now, we're at 10 o'clock, which is when we had our scheduled break. So let's take 15 minutes and get back here at, say, 10:13. All right, we'll give folks another minute or so to get back from break. All right, well, let's hop back in. So the next section is the 0110. It's the FIP initiative project level grant process. So the proposed edits here are, well, starting at 2, subsection 2, just kind of looking to align this with our other language and rules. So applications shall be submitted on the most current format prescribed by OWEB. Not really doing forms anymore. So a bit of minutia, but wanted to update that in rule. The elimination on subsection 3 of the matching contribution language, and we'll get to that here in a second, but if we do go with the route that we're currently proposing, which is accounting for match at the project level, this is redundant and not needed. And the technical review team language in the new section 3, looking to delete that last sentence. Again, found this kind of redundant to the technical review team definition that already exists in the OWEB rules. But I'll stop and see if there's any questions on those proposed edits. Okay, so not seeing any. In the new subsection 5, looking to provide a little better clarity on the project revisions process that happens at the project level with FIP. So just adding some language here that we think better clarifies what happens if there are revisions to applications, project level applications within a FIP initiative. And then here's the match topic. So subsection 7 outlines basically that FIP match would be accounted for at the initiative level, which was all good, except to be completely candid, we don't have a very good way of tracking match at a programmatic level. And particularly with the language that it has here, that really FIP partnerships have to come up with 25% match by the end of the biennium was really problematic for a number of reasons. One being that, as you know, projects can take quite a while to get off the ground, and the actual reported match wasn't happening until the end of projects. So you're getting the project completion reports with the match in them, and that could be well beyond the end of a particular biennium. So we didn't have any really good way, or we don't have any good way of tracking match at a program level, programmatic level within a given biennium. So what we're proposing here is to eliminate this rule, have match reported at the project level like any other OEB grant, and keeping the spirit of that programmatic match. If, say, for example, a FIP partnership has a $5 million Forest Service grant that they are using to match or leverage their FIP initiative, the partnership could use that same agreement and upload it as match and just account for it at the project level. So they could use that for, if it is a $5 million agreement with the Forest Service, that same agreement could then be used as match really for the life of the FIP initiative. And the partnership would just need to make sure to account for, they used $100,000 of that Forest Service agreement to match this grant, $200,000 to match another grant, et cetera, just to make sure that they're not exceeding the available match within that Forest Service agreement. So we're thinking that keeps the spirit of programmatic match, but it aligns better with OEB's existing systems on how we actually account for match. But I'll stop here, see if other OEB staff have thoughts on this, and open it up for questions, comments from the RAC as well. Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. One other thing to note here that's a recent change in OEB's programs is that the technical assistance and engagement types have a lower match requirement than the restoration and the monitoring grants. The restoration and monitoring remain 25%. The TA and engagement are 5%. And so that also affords some flexibility for partnerships as you're trying to figure out how to construct your match requirement.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. And that also gets at the earlier proposed edit to the rules that eliminated the 25% language, because given those 5% match requirements for TA and engagement, in reality, that could mean that a FIP partnership would be, the requirements would be less than 25% at the programmatic level. So, any thoughts on this one? I know this is potentially a big substantive change to the rules.
I just want to clarify that I'm understanding right. Is it like truly in rule, you will completely eliminate the requirement for match?
So the match would be, the requirements would basically revert to Division 5 in this case. So it would align with all other grant programs. So the restoration match would be 25%, monitoring be 25%, and TA and engagement would be 5%. Because the Division 5 rules state that there's going to be match, and that will be determined with the grant offering, and those percentages are currently the match requirements.
So it would take it back to the similar structure as open solicitation, and that it's required on a grant by grant basis.
Yes.
As a FIP, I would make a strong argument that that is not ideal and is one of the big perks of the FIP program. One of the really great things about it is that flexibility. There are some projects where there are more funders whose priorities overlap with the project type than just OWEB, and match is much easier to secure. And there are other projects that just don't have the diversity of funders at the table, or the landowner is in a place where they're really not able to provide match. They don't own equipment. They don't have the financial resources. And so having the flexibility to apply match where we have it and we can get it really has helped us substantially implement our FIP. That being said, I think we're well over the 25% requirement for our initiative, because there are some places where we can really leverage other funders, and OWEB can play a smaller role, but us having that flexibility is huge. And also OWEB has been just an invaluable partner through the FIP in helping us with adaptive management for restoration projects. It has been an absolute game changer for our organization to be able to stand behind the work that we do when things don't go as planned. And OWEB's FIP program has really enabled us to do that successfully. And it's been just huge for our entire partnership. And it's very hard to get match on those adaptive management projects because they are not necessarily achieving new conservation outcomes or enabling us to ensure our conservation outcomes that we originally intended to get, and to show our community and landowners that we don't just walk away. And so that's an example where it would be very hard for us to get a match requirement at a project level. So yeah, I guess definitely some hesitations on my end for that change.
Yeah, thanks, Haley. See if this helps. So in the examples that you provided, you said that some projects are maybe more apt to get match from outside sources than other projects within your FIP geography. So the way we're thinking of this is that match that you're able to get for those projects that are perhaps more attractive to other funders, you could use that match as OWEB match for all projects within a FIP geography.
I guess I'm having a hard time understanding what change you are recommending then. Is the change that instead of 25% over the initiative, it's 25% for all monitoring grants, 25% for all restoration? Like, I might just not be understanding and not seeing it in front of me in the proposed rule correctly.
Yeah, so the proposed revision here is really where that match is being accounted for. So right now it's partnerships have to have 25% match, and it's accounted for at the programmatic level. And what we're saying is that we don't have a good system of accounting for that at the programmatic level. OEB system is really built to account for match at that project level. So what we're proposing is that we track the match at the project level while still providing that flexibility of, you know, what if a project, a restoration project within a given FIP initiative has 100% match to it, that the partners can agree to use 75% of that match on other projects within their FIP geography. So we're being flexible in including that sort of the match as programmatic, but it's really attributing it to project level grants. And yeah, go ahead, Haley.
I'm going to acknowledge that we totally don't need to go down my rabbit hole if I'm the only one not understanding this. I'm like super happy to one off. In what you just described, Eric, I'm having a hard time seeing like practically how that works on the grantee side. Like if I write a grant, a restoration grant for project A, a separate grant for project B, and a separate grant for project C, you know, project B and C have no match, but project A has a ton. I can just take money out of that project budget and change the budget of my other projects to utilize that match, even though the project cost wouldn't align.
Yeah, so you'd be able to account for that match within the project A's excess match. You'd be able to account for in project B and project C, just included in the budget.
The way the OEB's budgets are, I don't think it's as easy as it's maybe being talked about, but I'm super happy to step aside and maybe I can chat with one of you after about the logistics of that. I guess my only remaining comment as a RAC member is like, just retain the flexibility where you can, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Haley. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention that I also do think it might be a little confusing to remove all mention of match from the FIP rules and only have them described in the other specific restoration style grant initiatives without any clarification herein that there is some sort of initiative level flexibility. I don't know what that language would look like, but it might be helpful to have that spelled out so that folks aren't just left with those other rules around match as their only indication.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Leah. And we do mention it in a little bit here, but I think your point is well taken. And go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Leah, and I think it could potentially address Haley's concern. If there's something in here that basically says what Eric said earlier, that in a FIP, you could have project A that has excess match and it's fully budgeted across those budget categories. Something in here that says you can apply that excess match to another project application, and we'd have to work out the details. Like, let's say it's just a other contracted services line item that shows up in that budget and has the correct match amount, but there's clearly a description in that application that says we're using project A for project B's match. I think there could be some language in here that says that. The other complexity here is if we were to fall back on the current language, technically it's no longer a 25% match. It would be some mix of 25 and 5% depending on, you know, what you budgeted. So that gets complicated really quickly. So in the spirit of what Haley said, I you know, what we'd like to do is maintain maximum flexibility in its simplest form that's manageable in terms of the systems that we have, as Eric indicated earlier on. So I think we can accommodate that issue that Haley brought up, and that we don't have to worry about the 25 and 5% because we'd be doing that on a project by project basis. But I agree, there should be something in here that says you can essentially include match from another FIP project, even though it's not part of that other project's budget. So we'll have to work on how to say that so that it makes sense. But I think we can do that.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Eric. Well articulated. Okay. Any other thoughts on match? Yeah. Good discussion. Just had some other minor edits on the grant types here in this section, and then moving down to the distribution of funds. Remove the development FIP language and implementation, and then moving into reporting, which is the next section with, you know, I'd say somewhat substantial edits. We're really actually looking to kind of clarify the board reporting process and requirements here. But first, we suggested eliminating what was subsection 2 about partnerships reporting to OEB staff through a collaboratively established process and timeline. I think this already occurs and does not need to be in our administrative rules. And then the actual reporting to the board is, we're making clear that the partnerships are working with OEB staff here, and then reporting the initiative progress for the biennium, which is in subsection A, and then additional investments generated through the initiative beyond match used for project level applications. And then, and this is the same, but reporting the updated work plan and budgets for the board for the next biennium, and any proposed changes to the geography, scope, or core partners of the initiative. So all that would be encompassed in a report to the board. So any questions? Okay. And then the last section is the FIP rule waiver section and review of rules, and we don't have any proposed revisions here. So that is it for the FIP rules. Are there any thoughts on any of these sections that we've gone through today? Any extra thoughts that anybody's had? So I noted a few places where staff have some work to do. One is on the match. We need to add some language to clarify the flexibility that we intend to have within the FIP rules, but still account for tracking match at the project level. And then I don't know if it requires any revisions to the text, but there was a good discussion about the overlap rule. So we have one more meeting that is on the calendar, and we could, I think, pretty quickly go over, if we do have that meeting, we could discuss any changes to the match language and if there's additional discussion that needs to be had on the overlap rule. I don't think it would take anywhere close to 3 hours. But what if folks think about having probably a relatively short meeting? I don't recall exactly when it's scheduled, but I think it's at some point in September. Just keeping that one that's on the calendar and it being pretty quick. Got some thumbs up. Okay. We also have an agenda item around impacts to small businesses and a fiscal impact, but an overall fiscal impact that these proposed rule revisions might have. And again, that won't take very long, but I do want to make sure we have adequate time for that. And thanks, Denise. So September 12th, 9 to noon. Again, I think we'd probably be pretty quick on that. So with that, do we have anybody on the call that's not a RAC member or OWEB staff that wants to provide public comments? I don't see anybody. Okay, so I think our homework is to work on particularly those two items, and we can go through the whole rule set again and make sure we're dotting I's and crossing T's, and we can kind of button everything up, hopefully on the 12th. So thanks, everyone. Really appreciate the discussion today. I think we're getting really close, and really appreciate your input. So have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you.
Thanks all.
Thanks.